Who are the people who rush around with brooms and timers and check the oven twice? That's who we're talking about today. Hi, this is Jill from the Northwoods talking about Bible topics one small step at a time. This is next in our Mirrors series, where we're going to investigate the life of Martha. Martha and Mary are the sisters of Lazarus, the person that Jesus raised from the dead. And there's a fantastic book out there. I highly recommend it. I love this book called How to Be a Mary in a Martha World. But we're going to talk about Martha today. It's not that Martha did anything wrong. It's not that Martha made bad choices. If you're interested in hearing more about Martha and Mary, you can listen to the Bible in Small Steps podcast, either Luke chapter 10 or John 11 through 12. That's the whole story of Martha and Mary. But Martha was a kind person, like I said, rushed around, cleaning, sweeping, checking the oven twice. The other person is Mary, and we'll talk about her next week. But we have these two people in comparison. Now, it's kind of interesting because I listen to a lot of podcasts, and they say, well, if you're listening to this podcast, I can guess that you're a Martha. Guess what? I'm a Mary. I am not a Martha. I am not that person who rushes around and makes sure that the house is perfectly clean and that my hors d'oeuvres have a little tiny piece of frosting on the top so it looks pretty. I'm just not that person. But I know people who are, and I am definitely the person who would be sitting there like, hold on, I'm sitting at the feet of Jesus, leave me alone. That we're going to hear about who Martha is, and then we'll talk about Mary next week. They both have lessons for us. So first of all, the moment, when did she live? So she lived at the time of Jesus' ministry in a small village called Bethany. It's about 2 miles outside of Jerusalem, close enough to hear the crowds of Jerusalem, to know what's going on inside the city, but far enough to get a little bit of peace. Maybe we could say she was in the burbs. But she shared a home with her sister Mary and her brother Lazarus, who was a dear friend of Jesus. Hospitality in the first century was not optional. It was a sacred duty. Water had to be fetched from a well, and it meant carrying it very big distances. Bread was baked fresh. Cushions were laid out for reclining guests. The house would be full of dust, chatter, smells, cooking oils, roasting grain. Everything was by scratch. We go and get these prepared meals that didn't exist at that time. Luke tells us that Martha welcomed him, Jesus, into her home in Luke 10:38. And that means more than Martha just made him dinner. She was opening up her life, her space, her resources to the Son of God. It's an act of devotion and courage at that particular time. But that's what being a host was back then. That's what you did when you were a host. And you were more than what I think we think of it today. At the I for identity, at her core, she's a woman who showed her love by doing things for other people. She was competent, dependable, detail-oriented. She was the kind of person who brought structure. I think when other people bring emotion or thoughts, instead, she was able to carry the weight and the work of many people. And we recognize Martha and so many people probably around us, that she sort of had the belief that love meant that you worked hard to provide for that other person. And I'm not saying that you don't. And we all know Martha's out there. And I'm coming across situations in life where people who are Marthas their whole life, and suddenly they get to the point where they're not capable of doing that like they used to be able to do it when they were in their 20s or 30s, now are feeling hurt, like somehow they're falling down on their obligations in life. So when Mary comes and sits at the feet of Jesus, Martha's overwhelmed. She's overwhelmed by the unfinished work. And she bursts in. And says, Lord, tell my sister to help me. Instead of her just sitting there, you tell her to get up and help me do this stuff. That's Luke 10:40. And she says, don't you care? Don't you care that I am being burdened. I am tired. I am unseen. I am stretched thin. And yet Jesus says to her gently, he tries to redirect her heart. He goes, Martha, Martha. This is one of my favorites. You are worried about so many things, but the one thing that is necessary, Mary has chosen a better portion. Oh boy, like I said, you feel that, right? He loves Martha. And then that repetition of the name, Martha, Martha, you can feel that love coming out of Jesus. He saw her. He saw her frustration. He knows what was going on in her heart. So the right choices, she made many good choices, right? Her home was open to people. Her service was sincere. She invited Jesus to come into her home when many people hesitated or were afraid. In John 11, when her brother Lazarus died, she shows faith. While grief was still in the air, she ran out to meet Jesus outside the village. And what she said was, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. That's John 11:21. She has faith. She has ultimate faith in Jesus, not just as a human being, but as a Messiah. I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who comes into this world. That's John 11:27. That's as powerful as any confession we have seen in the entire New Testament when we see Peter's confession in Matthew 16. She just says it. And so Martha, who is remembered as the busy one, is also the theologian. Her faith isn't shallow. She serves, but she believes at the same time. She shows us that even though she's tired, she can speak the truth boldly to God himself right there. But pitfalls, some wrongs and risks that she had, that's our other R, is that she's always mistaking, I think, service with spirituality. Her heart is generous. She's trying to provide a good place in her home for her guests, but it's making her anxious. She is not spending time sitting at the foot of the Lord who is in her house. To me, if the Lord was in my house, sitting at the table, I'd want to be with him every second and just hear what he has to say. He can get us some fish and some loaves right there. But instead, she's doing everything she can for Jesus instead of being with Jesus. And it's a trap, I think, that many believers fall into. We get enthralled with our calendars, and then we feel like we have empty souls because we spend no time working on the soul part of things. Her distraction wasn't from sin. It was from good things, crowding out the best things, the most important things. I just got done recording in Start with Small Steps about essentialism, which is about putting the most important things first. I think that's where she went wrong. The Greek text says that she was periospato, which means literally pulled around in circles, that the world is spinning faster and faster and achieving less and less. Modern neuroscience looks at that when we multitask, it drains our empathy, it shortens our attention span, we actually get less done. When we live in a Martha world, in overdrive, we lose the ability to notice the holy, to notice the silence, to be there with Jesus, with him, and not for him. Jesus didn't say, stop serving. He says, instead, choose the better portion. The invitation is not to abandon her work, but is to bring peace into it. And that's what he's talking about. And so this ongoing message for all of us is that she teaches us that love is expressed through works. It's beautiful, but it does not replace love. It does not replace worship and silence. And so Jesus' gentle correction calls us to reorder the soul. presence before performance, listening before leading, relationship before responsibility. So we're just putting things in a little bit different order. If you feel like you are worked to death, if you are always doing everything for everybody else, that everything else is going down the tubes because you are just so focused in this kind of Martha world. When we look at the phrase, the better portion, in Greek, it echoes Psalms 16:5. The Lord is my portion and my cup. It's as if Jesus is saying that Mary has chosen Jesus, not the tasks, not the table, the one sitting at the table. That's the important piece, is not to give up the things that she was doing, but to instead choose the most important thing. Martha's lesson is that the better meal isn't the bread she bakes, it's the bread of life sitting right there in her living room. And so it's not, like I said, to talk down to her, to rebuke her, but instead for her to look at her priorities. And when I reflect on all of this, Martha mirrors every, time we felt invisible while running around and doing all the tasks, or we feel overburdened by being the only one who actually gets anything done. Maybe we're the ones who remember the birthdays and does the dishes and plans the meals and holds the whole world together faithfully, but exhausted. And maybe you wondered, like Martha worried, does anyone see me? Does God see me? Make her, my sister, see me and help me with the work. But just like he says her name twice, he says yours, gently, knowingly, saying your name. Oh, Jill. The mental load that we think of in this modern world, the invisible things that we tracked and we worry over, have existed since the beginning of time. And we see it written right over here in Bethany. Martha carried it, and Jesus' presence reminds us that our worth is not in the sum total of the tasks we complete. It's in the nearness to Him, to Jesus, that defines us, not our efficiency. And that should give us a great deal of relief, knowing that what's important is for us to be in that presence, that we don't have to be a Martha all the time, that we can reorder our priorities. And so some small steps that we can take is, before taking on a new task, start your day with a moment of silence, of prayer, a breath, a whisper, a good cry. Maybe that's at the end of the day. But instead of going and starting performing right away, take a moment. I'm that person. I hop out of bed and I jump to action and I start working and I get things done, and I need to remember to take that pause. I think we need to ask God to remind us that He is our portion. It's that our value comes from being with Him and not doing anything. And that we should think about, when we serve with our presence, we shouldn't panic. We shouldn't turn chores into it destroying us. For a long time, I took chores as, and errands and work and everything else that I do, to the point where I had no time for my health. I had no time for prayer. I crawl into bed and think I'm going to pray, and then I fall asleep exhausted. When we can take chores and go into prayer, or we can give thanks for people, when we can cook dinner as an offering of love, but not an obligation where we say, hey, make her help me. We sometimes are going to put those things away. Maybe we find someone else to cook dinner. Maybe we go pick up a dinner so that we have more time to have love with the people around us and love towards God Himself. And then the idea too is, Martha felt alone because she didn't really ask for help. She didn't ask Mary for help. She broke in and said to Jesus, you tell Martha or Mary what to do. But maybe if she had invited other people into her service and letting some of the community help her out, that could have been a ministry of everybody involved helping out. Many hands makes light work. And then the other part of it is resting without guilt. Taking a Sabbath, resting, being with God, in the presence of God. Martha needed permission, I think, to rest in God's presence. And sometimes we feel that way too. He wants us to be there. If we go into his presence and spend time, whether it's on a Sabbath or a sabbatical or a week retreat, that is having presence with God. He has told us that's obedience. And I think it's easy for us to remember that we're loved, not evaluated. When Martha gets it wrong, Jesus stayed for dinner. His love doesn't depend on her performance. It depends on his nature. He is the nature of love, and he loves us for who we are, not what we do. I think about these people in my life who are saddened because they're no longer capable of cooking the meals they used to, cleaning the house like they used to be able to clean, and it's bringing them grief. And they have to understand that love comes from Jesus, and it is freely given. It comes from a spouse. Your spouse loves you, not because you perform, but because they love you for who you are. Because God first loved us, we love other people in that same manner. And so when people feel, like I said, that they have been removed from love because they're no longer performing like they used to, we have to remember that love is not based on performance, not ever. It's one of the most beautiful twists, I think, in the entire Bible. The last time that we see Martha is in John 12. She is still serving with her actions, but this time she's calm. She anoints the feet of Jesus with oil. Lazarus sits at the table, but when we see Martha later on, we see a transformed human being. She serves, but now with calm, without complaint, with peace, and she is learning how to sit at the feet of her Messiah, of her Lord, and now understanding how that she can bring service, but also stillness, and also listening, not just serving for, but serving with, bringing all of that together. So maybe our goal isn't to stop being Marthas. Maybe our goal is to become a Martha who also spends time listening, who also spends time hearing, who spends time in worship and in peace and in prayer, choosing the better portion. And to remember that Jesus delights in our company even more than he delights in our competence or our actions. All right, everyone, thanks so much. Appreciate you listening. I hope this Mirrors podcast has been good for you. I think it's easy for us to see in these people in the Bible a little bit of ourselves in who we are. Where did they go right? Where did they go wrong? And how did God see them? And how did God tell them? Maybe you can focus your self towards those better portions. Thanks so much. Put your comments right here. Are you a Mary or a Martha? Put them right here. And if there's anything that I can do for you, anything I can pray for you, you can put comments here, or you can email me at jill@startwithsmallsteps.com. I would love to hear from you. Thanks so much and have a great day.